that if tariffs are implemented against Canada, we will respond. We won't relent until tariffs are removed, and of course, everything is on the table.
The trade war with Canada threatens North America's worst economic crisis in decades. Look, this isn't just another trade dispute. It's a battle that could decide the future of electric vehicles, car prices, and even global economic power. The United States thought it was protecting its industries, but Canada just played its ultimate trump card. And now Tesla, Ford, and General Motors are paying the price. How did this happen? Who's really winning this war? And more importantly, what does this mean for you as a consumer? The stakes have never been higher. If you think this won't affect you, think again. Stay with us, because this story is only just beginning. The U.S. auto industry is under attack, but not from who you think. For decades, the two countries have shared a deeply intertwined automotive trade network. But a sudden policy shift has put that relationship in jeopardy, with President Donald Trump imposing aggressive tariffs on Canadian imports. The fragile balance of the North American auto market has been thrown into chaos. At the heart of the dispute is a sweeping trade policy aimed at bolstering domestic production. The United States government has justified these tariffs as a necessary measure to protect American automakers from foreign competition. However, instead of strengthening the industry, the move has triggered a chain reaction of economic disruption. The cost of importing essential raw materials has surged, forcing automakers to make difficult decisions that could reshape the industry for years to come. The impact of these tariffs is felt at every stage of the production process. American factories rely heavily on Canadian aluminum and steel for manufacturing vehicle frames, engines, and key electronic components. These materials cross the border multiple times during the assembly process, making any additional cost a major burden on automakers. With tariffs driving up expenses, companies are left with only two choices: pass the cost on to consumers or absorb the losses and risk financial instability. Either option spells trouble for the future of vehicle production in the United States. As the industry scrambles to adapt, a growing sense of panic is setting in among manufacturers, suppliers, and dealers. The economic model that once made North American car production so efficient is now under siege. And just when it seemed like things could not get worse, Canada responded with its own countermeasures, escalating the trade war to an entirely new level. How Canada just outmaneuvered the U.S. in this trade war. The United States may have fired the first shot in this economic conflict, but Canada has proven that it will not back down without a fight. Rather than reacting impulsively, the Canadian government has launched a calculated counteroffensive that is directly targeting American industries in ways that could have long-lasting consequences. By carefully selecting its retaliatory tariffs, Canada has managed to turn the tables on the United States, hitting key sectors that are vital to the American economy. One of the most significant moves by Canada has been its decision to impose tariffs on critical automotive components. Unlike broad, indiscriminate economic penalties, these measures are designed to create maximum disruption while minimizing harm to Canadian industries. By focusing on materials that American automakers cannot easily source elsewhere, Canada has placed immense pressure on manufacturers, forcing them to rethink their supply chains and production strategies. Beyond the auto industry, Canada has extended its retaliation to other politically sensitive industries, including agriculture and consumer goods. By imposing tariffs on products that originate from key American states, Canada is strategically increasing pressure on the United States government, knowing that economic hardship in these regions could lead to political fallout. This move forces American lawmakers to reconsider their stance, as the economic pain is now being felt far beyond the automotive sector. While the full impact of Canada's countermeasures is still unfolding, one thing is clear: this is no longer a simple trade dispute. It has evolved into a high-stakes economic battle that could reshape the future of North American commerce. And as tensions continue to rise, the fallout is hitting one industry harder than any other: electric vehicles. The EV industry is crumbling, and Tesla is the biggest loser. Few industries have been as severely affected by this trade war as electric vehicles. At the center of this turmoil is Tesla, a company that has long been regarded as the leader in innovation and sustainability. But now its future is hanging in the balance. With Canada imposing new restrictions on raw materials essential to battery production, Tesla is facing one of the greatest challenges in its history. The key issue lies in the supply of critical minerals, such as nickel, lithium, and aluminum. These resources, which are indispensable for manufacturing high-performance electric vehicle batteries, have traditionally been sourced from Canadian suppliers. However, with tariffs and trade barriers disrupting the flow of these materials, Tesla is now struggling to secure the raw goods needed to maintain production at its current scale. The consequences of these disruptions extend far beyond Tesla. Other major automakers that are investing heavily in electric vehicle technology, including Ford and General Motors, are also feeling the effects. The cost of producing electric vehicles is rising sharply, making it more difficult for manufacturers to keep prices competitive. At the same time, investors are growing increasingly wary as the financial uncertainty surrounding the industry is casting doubt on its long-term viability. For consumers, this means higher prices and potential delays in new vehicle releases. The push toward widespread adoption of electric vehicles is now facing significant obstacles, raising concerns about whether the industry can meet government-mandated sustainability goals. And while electric vehicle manufacturers are struggling to navigate these challenges, the crisis is not limited to this sector alone. The trade war is causing ripples throughout the entire auto market, making it more expensive for everyone to buy a car, whether it is electric or not. Why your next car could cost a fortune. The effects of the trade war are being felt across the board, and consumers are paying the price. The cost of new vehicles is rising at an alarming rate, with manufacturers passing on the increased cost of production to buyers. The result? Higher price tags for everything from compact sedans to full-size trucks. Even used car prices are surging, as supply chain disruptions limit the availability of new inventory. A major factor driving up prices is the rising cost of raw materials. With tariffs inflating the price of steel, aluminum, and other essential components, automakers have no choice but to adjust their pricing strategies to stay profitable. Additionally, supply chain delays caused by increased border regulations are making it more difficult for manufacturers to maintain a steady flow of parts, leading to production slowdowns and vehicle shortages. This problem extends beyond individual buyers. Businesses that rely on commercial vehicle fleets, such as delivery services and transportation companies, are now facing unprecedented expenses. The higher cost of acquiring new vehicles could lead to increased service fees, which would ultimately be passed down to consumers in the form of higher prices for goods and services. And just when it seemed like things could not get any worse, there is one more factor making vehicles more expensive: rising interest rates. With financing costs climbing, buyers are facing higher monthly payments, making it even harder to afford a new car. But here's the real problem. This trade war isn't just about cars. It's about jobs, businesses, and your wallet. And as economic uncertainty continues to grow, the ripple effects of this crisis are only beginning to be felt. The ugly truth about protecting American jobs. When new tariffs were introduced, they were framed as a way to bring jobs back to American workers. Factories would be revitalized, production would increase, and employment would skyrocket. That was the promise. But reality is painting a very different picture. Instead of securing jobs, these policies are driving companies to shut down or move operations elsewhere. American manufacturers, particularly in the automotive industry, rely heavily on imported materials from Canada. With new tariffs driving up the cost of those materials, companies are being forced to make difficult decisions. Absorb the losses, increase prices, or cut back on labor. Many are choosing the latter. Several automotive plants across the country have already begun massive layoffs. Factory workers, some of whom have been employed for decades, are suddenly finding themselves unemployed with little warning. Supply chain disruptions mean that even smaller businesses, ones that provide parts and services to major manufacturers, are struggling to keep their doors open. It is not just about the big corporations. This is hitting local businesses hard, threatening entire communities built around manufacturing jobs. Ironically, the very policies that were meant to protect American workers are putting them out of work. While some politicians continue to champion these tariffs as necessary, the people on the ground are feeling the consequences. The reality is clear. Without access to affordable raw materials, production slows, costs rise, and the first thing to be cut is the workforce. This crisis is not contained to one sector. It is spreading fast, and it is affecting far more than just jobs. The next impact will hit where it hurts the most: everyday expenses. How this trade war is about to hit you harder than you think. At first, it might seem like this trade war is just another battle between governments, a fight that only concerns politicians and corporations. But that is not the case. The effects of these economic policies are creeping into daily life, making everything more expensive for the average American. The automotive sector is not the only one suffering. Industries that rely on imported goods, from agriculture to consumer electronics, are also seeing costs skyrocket when tariffs increase the price of raw materials. Companies do not simply absorb the losses, they pass them on to the consumer. That means the cost of household goods, groceries, and essential items is steadily rising, and families across the country are feeling this strain. A trip to the grocery store costs more than it did just months ago. Electronics, appliances, and even construction materials are becoming more expensive, making it harder for families to afford basic needs. Small businesses that depend on affordable supplies are struggling to maintain their prices, forcing many to increase what they charge customers or shut down entirely. Inflation was already a growing concern before the trade war escalated. Now, with rising costs fueled by tariffs, it is becoming an even bigger problem. Households are having to cut back on discretionary spending, prioritizing essentials while putting off larger purchases. The American economy is heavily driven by consumer spending, and as prices rise, people are spending less. That is a recipe for economic downturn. With people tightening their budgets and businesses struggling, this crisis is shifting from an economic issue to a political one. And with another election cycle looming, this trade war could become one of the biggest factors in deciding the future of the nation. The political fallout that no one saw coming. Trade policies have always been a major point of debate, but this time the stakes are even higher. As economic hardships continue to grow, frustration among voters is reaching a boiling point. Many who initially supported these tariffs, believing they would help American industries thrive, are now questioning whether they were a mistake. Factories are closing, unemployment is rising, and the cost of living is becoming unbearable. This is not just an economic problem, it is a political liability. The current administration is facing backlash from workers and businesses alike, and opponents are seizing the opportunity to highlight the flaws in these policies. With elections on the horizon, candidates are being forced to take a clear stance on trade. Some argue that the tariffs should remain, insisting that short-term pain is necessary for long-term gain. Others are calling for an immediate reversal, warning that continued economic instability could push the country into a deeper crisis. The uncertainty is dividing not only politicians, but also voters. Swing states with strong manufacturing industries are watching closely. These are the states that could decide the outcome of the election, and they are the ones being hit the hardest by the trade war. People who once supported these protectionist policies are now among the most affected, and their votes will reflect their struggles. It is not just domestic politics at play. Canada is watching, waiting to see how the political landscape will shift. If leadership changes, trade negotiations could take a new direction. If policies remain unchanged, tensions will continue to rise. But there is one factor that could escalate this crisis even further: energy, the hidden risk that could send gas prices through the roof. While the auto industry and consumer goods are bearing the brunt of this trade war, there is another sector at risk: energy. The United States is heavily dependent on Canada for oil, natural gas, and electricity. If tensions between the two nations continue to rise, energy exports could become the next battleground. Right now, Canada supplies nearly half of the crude oil imported into the United States. If Canada decides to cut exports or increase prices in response to ongoing tariffs, the consequences could be devastating. Gas prices, already volatile, could surge overnight, placing even more financial pressure on consumers. The trucking industry, a backbone of American commerce, would take a major hit. Higher fuel costs mean higher shipping costs, and once again, those costs would be passed on to businesses and consumers. Every product transported by road, from food to medicine to essential supplies, would see price hikes. Airlines and other transportation sectors would also suffer, making travel more expensive. The potential for rolling blackouts is also a concern. Many northern states rely on Canadian hydroelectric power to keep the lights on. If Canada were to limit electricity exports, cities like New York, Chicago, and Detroit could experience severe energy shortages. While Canada has not yet made any drastic moves in the energy sector, the mere possibility is causing concern in Washington. If diplomatic tensions continue to escalate, it is only a matter of time before energy becomes a major leverage point. This trade war is no longer just about tariffs. It is about the future of economic relations, national security, and the everyday lives of millions of Americans. And the scariest part? This crisis is not just a North American problem. It is sending shockwaves around the world. But here is where things get even crazier. This is only the beginning. The whole world is watching, and global markets are reacting. The next moves in this economic standoff could shape international trade for decades to come. What happens next? The answers might surprise you. China is already taking advantage of this trade war. The trade war between the United States and Canada has created an economic void, and China is moving quickly to fill it. As the United States tightens its grip with tariffs and retaliatory policies, China is seizing the opportunity to strengthen its economic ties with Canada, positioning itself as a more reliable and stable trade partner. China's growing involvement is strategic and calculated. Canada has long been a major supplier of essential raw materials, including nickel, aluminum, and lithium, critical components in industries like technology, manufacturing, and electric vehicle production. With American trade restrictions disrupting supply chains, China has stepped in to negotiate new trade agreements that secure long-term access to these resources. This shift is not just a reaction to the US-Canada conflict, but a broader move by China to solidify its influence in North American markets. Beyond raw materials, China is also expanding its hold on Canada's energy sector. Chinese firms have increased investments in Canadian oil and natural gas, offering more favorable trade terms compared to the United States. By securing these energy resources, China not only strengthens its own energy security but also gains leverage in international trade negotiations. But the biggest shift may be in manufacturing. As Canadian firms seek alternative export destinations, China provides an eager market. Canadian businesses, especially in industries like agriculture and automotive parts, are now forging stronger trade relationships with China, ensuring they are not entirely dependent on U.S. trade policies. This realignment could have long-term consequences, making Canada less reliant on American economic stability and more connected to China's vast consumer market. This trade war has inadvertently accelerated China's global ambitions. By stepping into the economic vacuum left by the United States, China is reshaping trade patterns in ways that could redefine North American economic dominance for years to come. Europe's secret plan to replace the United States in global trade. While China is swiftly capitalizing on North American trade disruptions, European nations are executing their own strategic shifts. With the United States entangled in a prolonged economic standoff with Canada, European countries are strengthening their trade relationships and moving to position themselves as the next major global trade hub. The European Union has always been a powerful player in global trade, but now it sees an opportunity to expand its influence at the expense of the United States. In response to rising tariffs and growing uncertainty in North American markets, European leaders are pushing for stronger trade alliances with Canada. New trade agreements, some of which have been in development for years, are now being fast-tracked, ensuring that Canadian exports, including critical raw materials and advanced technology, flow into Europe instead of the United States. Germany and France in particular are leading the charge. These two economic giants have increased investments in Canadian manufacturing and energy sectors, working to secure long-term trade deals that bypass American tariffs. For Canadian companies, this provides an attractive alternative, one that offers stability and avoids the unpredictable policy shifts of the United States. At the same time, European automakers are taking full advantage of the disruption in the North American supply chain. With American auto companies struggling with rising costs, European manufacturers, such as those in Germany and Italy, are expanding their exports to Canada and even exploring the possibility of moving some of their operations to North America. This strategic move could allow Europe to dominate key markets that were once tightly controlled by American companies. Beyond trade agreements, Europe is also leveraging its position in financial markets. With North American economic uncertainty driving investors to seek more stable alternatives, European banks and financial institutions are absorbing capital that might have otherwise gone to the United States. This shift in economic power could have long-term consequences, making Europe a more dominant force in global trade while weakening America's financial influence. Europe is not waiting for the United States to resolve its trade war. By moving quickly to establish itself as Canada's preferred trade partner, European nations are ensuring they remain a global economic powerhouse while America struggles with its own internal conflicts. Can the United States and Canada even fix this? With economic tensions rising, one critical question remains. Can the United States and Canada resolve this trade war before the damage becomes irreversible? The path to de-escalation is not simple, and both nations face immense political and economic obstacles that make reconciliation increasingly difficult. For the United States, walking back tariffs without appearing weak is a major challenge. President Donald Trump has built his economic strategy around strong trade policies and American-first initiatives. Any attempt to ease tensions with Canada would require a carefully crafted deal that maintains the appearance of strength while simultaneously reducing the impact on American businesses and consumers. On the Canadian side, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is under intense pressure to stand firm against U.S. policies. Canada's retaliatory tariffs were not just about economic strategy. They were a political statement, demonstrating that Canada will not be bullied by its largest trade partner. Reversing course now could be seen as a loss of national sovereignty, a move that could have severe political consequences. Diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis are underway, but progress is slow. Both nations have attempted negotiations, but neither wants to be the first to concede. With businesses and consumers bearing the brunt of the economic impact, there is increasing pressure on leaders from both sides to find a compromise before long-term damage is done. One potential resolution could involve a phased reduction of tariffs, coupled with new trade agreements that benefit both nations. However, with global players like China and Europe aggressively stepping in to replace the United States in key trade sectors, the longer this standoff lasts, the more difficult it will be for America to regain lost economic ground. The reality is that this trade war has already changed global trade dynamics in ways that cannot be easily undone. Even if an agreement is reached, the trust between these two allies has been severely damaged, and future economic relations may never be the same. The worst-case scenario. Could this collapse the auto industry? The automotive industry is one of the biggest casualties of this trade war, and if the conflict continues, the consequences could be devastating. Rising costs, supply chain disruptions, and shifting trade alliances are pushing the U.S. auto sector toward a breaking point. One of the most immediate concerns is the soaring cost of raw materials. With tariffs driving up prices on aluminum, steel, and essential car components, manufacturers are struggling to maintain production costs. This has already led to factory slowdowns and workforce reductions. But if conditions worsen, Full-scale factory closures could be next. Another major concern is supply chain stability. The automotive industry relies on seamless trade between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. With tariffs making it more expensive to import critical parts, automakers are now considering moving production outside of North America to cut costs. This could mean job losses in manufacturing hubs like Detroit, Michigan, and Chicago, Illinois, as companies look to Europe or Asia for more affordable alternatives. The impact on consumers is equally troubling. If trade tensions persist, the price of new vehicles will continue to rise, making car ownership increasingly unaffordable for the average American. This could lead to a sharp decline in vehicle sales, further crippling the industry and causing even more job losses. The worst-case scenario? If American automakers cannot adapt quickly, foreign competitors, particularly those in Europe and China, could seize control of the market. With the United States struggling to keep up, the dominance of American car companies could come to an end, marking the beginning of a new era where foreign manufacturers dictate the future of the global auto industry. This is not just an economic battle. It is a turning point that could define the future of global trade. Will the United States adapt and reclaim its dominance? Or are we witnessing a permanent shift in economic power? What do you think? Should the United States renegotiate its trade policies, or is this a necessary sacrifice for long-term economic strength? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and be part of the conversation. And if you want to stay updated on how this unfolds, make sure to subscribe for more in-depth analysis.